This is Louis Zumbaugh with Rush Hour Ag. Leave your message after the tone.
Hey, Louis, it's Elliot Henderson. Can't wait to tell you about
rolling down the back road, truth riding with the dust, talking agriculture policy with people you can trust. From the field to the Capitol, we're breaking it down. Real talk, real issues from a real farm town. Every hour's rush hour when the work won't leave, so we're cutting through the noise and setting things straight.
What's your rush today, Elliot? All right, well, welcome to Rush Hour Ag. Elliot, how you been?
Pretty good. How you been, Louie?
I haven't been too bad. Our had a busy day yesterday. I like to pick 20,000 a day if we can, and we got 23 through the combine, so we felt pretty good. And today we got moved back home here, so we were clear over by Rowley and Walker. So that's so we had everything already picked between us. So it was just a drive home. But back to down corn. That corn over there wasn't down too bad, but my corn at home's unfortunately down. So
yeah, anymore talking to guys around here, it seems like that's kind of what they've been doing too, is saving some of the stuff that's down towards the end.
Oh, I picked all mine early, but I just keep having more of it.
Right, yeah, maybe that's what's going on too. But yeah, we're staying pretty caught up here. I figured maybe
at least
a couple more days of going, we'll be done.
Oh yeah, we'll get done by the next week, we're hoping. So
good.
Well, anyway, yeah. So today we have a guest. We're trying. Everybody's on iPad today, so that's a little different for us. Nobody's in person. But today we have a gentleman named Ed Dubrick. He's from Cessna Park, Illinois, and I believe he raises Australian white sheep, chickens, turkeys, lamb, hens, produce, and he's got about everything. Started farming in 2020, and if I didn't take everything about you, tell us a little about yourself, Ed.
Well, you covered the highlights. No, you did good. Yeah, our farm, Cessna Park's about 90 miles straight south of Chicago. So everything in Illinois is where you are from Chicago. But no, yeah, you covered it. I also work off farm doing some policy work. Big fan of local food, agriculture, and I kind of come from a more conventional or quote unquote big ag background. I say that way because there's no shade or hate thrown at that when I say it like that. It takes all of us. So
sure. So when you're that close to Chicago, is that where you sell most of your products?
So we actually, we sell most of our product to Champaign-Urbana, which is where the University of Illinois is. So that's kind of our major market for us. It's a little bit closer, just easier to get to. So yeah.
The kids like to say crunchy. It's probably a little crunchier.
Yes. And I always tell people where we're at. I'm an hour from everything. So I'm an hour from about 5 towns, all give or take 50 to 80,000. So Lafayette, Indiana, Champaign, Bloomington, Danville, whatever. I'm just in the middle of nowhere. That's great for, I don't have a whole lot of competition, but it's also bad of every time I need something, those are the towns I got to go to because they don't have a 2x4 at the local hardware store or whatever, things like that. So
when you're selling farm to market, not produce, I know you do produce too, but when you're selling meat, do you do that? Do they come to your farm or your business, or do you take that to those cities and sell it, or do you have a storefront there, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we sell on our farm. We historically did farmers markets, and then my wife and I were blessed to have 2 children. And we decided doing those every Saturday morning with our 2 kids was too much. When we had one, we did it, but we could play zone defense. And then when we had to switch to man, it became too much. So we kind of gave that up and switched into doing a lot more wholesale. And I would actually say about 75-80% of our business is wholesale, which has been easier as a family man to I drop the product off, you retail it, and you let me know when you're empty. So that's been good for us.
So do you?
I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and
still pretty low,
yeah. And most of our wholesale customers are actually other farms. They might raise beef and pork or pork only, whatever, and then we just come in with some chicken and eggs to complement what they're already offering.
That's a good idea.
What's the dairy thing like there in Illinois? The unpasteurized, is that a thing there?
So there is a raw milk. Raw milk is legal in the state of Illinois. You have to get a permit from the public health department. It's definitely a growing trend, I'll say. It seems like it's on the rise. But dairy as a whole is very much so, I'll say large operations. In my area, if you went back in the 60s, you couldn't go a mile without running into a dairy farm. And now that's all left. It's few thousand head here, or 500-600 head seems to be the most. There's really get big, get out type of deal.
So you started this in 2020. So you've been doing it for 5 years. Is that kind of correct?
Yes, yeah. So my wife and I, we bought what I always call a farmette. There in 2019, a little 2-acre property, had a barn, little Morton building, nothing special, but I grew up having livestock. Was lucky enough that a elderly gentleman in town, I was a town kid, he had space in his barn. I wanted to have a 4-H calf. My friends kept their 4-H calves at his place, so I tagged along, and after a couple of years of being their shadow, I was like, hey, I could do this too. And then had one of my own, and he kind of took me under his wing, and I traded barn rent for putting up hay or planting corn or pulling wagons in the fall, and that's kind of what started my passion for ag. So when we bought our place, I knew at some point I was going to get back into it. I didn't know what that'd look like, and we bought our property, and the barn out back was just filled with the previous owner's stuff, and got it all cleaned out over a couple days. And I remember sitting at the dinner table, and my wife asked me, what are you gonna do with that barn? And honestly, I had no plans. I just knew I wasn't gonna have his stuff in it anymore. And she asked again, and I kind of shrugged her off, and so finally she asked again. I was like, I don't know, we're gonna get some chickens. And all right, shut up. Next question, please. But that was a joke, and that's what started it. And we raised the first 25 head of meat chickens, and me and her and one of my buddies, we butchered them in our garage. That was also the last time we home butchered. And it kind of went from there, and it's expanded ever since. And this year we'll do just shy of 8,000 meat chickens, about 500 turkeys, and then we've got a flock of about 400 laying hens. So still, in the grand scheme of things, still very small, but that growth curve in 5 years from doing 25 in my garage to doing 8,000 now is insane. Yeah, it's been a lot. It's been a fun ride.
And do you do all of them on your farm?
No, so we take, we raise them all on our farmette, and we've expanded since then. But we have all of our poultry processed at a USDA processor in Arthur, Illinois, which is about 90 miles away.
Right.
And since we do wholesale, it's got to be inspected meat to meet that in the state of Illinois. So
is there a lot of hoops to go through for that?
So not so much on the wholesale side of things. It's actually pretty easy. It's a meat broker's license from the State Department of Ag. They come out and inspect you, $50 a year. The retail side of it's harder, believe it or not, and that's always kind of made me chuckle a little bit. Sell direct to consumer. I'm the one handing them the meat. They see me. They know the farm it came from, and that takes more hoops than me to sell it to whoever and then them distribute it. Where there's a few more gaps in the chain. So that's always kind of, I don't know. So make me scratch my head a little bit.
And can you so was there any policy changes that you were involved in?
Yeah,
that kind of got the
So there's a couple different things. When we were doing farmers markets, one of the hurdles I was running into, and again, I live in the middle of nowhere, so we were always driving to these other towns to find a customer base, and so we were often in multiple counties, and every county regulates things a little bit differently based off their county health department. Everybody's got a different fee. Everybody's got different requirements. When we started, there was one of the counties we sold in was going to be $1,500 a year to get their permit, and we were just getting started. Like,
oh wow,
all right, we're not going to try that. We're going to go to this county over here that's $400, and I don't know if I'm going to do this in 3 months, let alone a year. So that's kind of how we got started. And as that grew and snowballed, we had a little bit of I'll say proof of concept that, hey, this might be something. Started doing more counties. And then I remember I got involved with the Illinois Stewardship Alliance about that same time as a member, just trying to navigate some of these regulations. And hey, what do I have to do to be legal? Because I don't want some state or federal inspector knocking on my door and telling me, hey, here's your fine, and I'm going to take your freezers. So was talking with folks there and saying, hey, this is the problem I'm running into on this farmer's market deal. Like, does this seem right? Why am I paying the same amount of money that the Walmart is down the road, and they're open 24/7, 365, and I'm here for 4 hours on a Saturday? So we got talking, and it was a common occurrence or problem for other people. And so we kind of worked together, and were able to get a law passed in Illinois that set a cap on how much a county could charge for those permits, and then also put some baseline regulation in there. So each county can still enforce it as they see fit from there, but hey, here's the baseline. So at least we're starting at a similar point, instead of prior, it was always said it was a patchwork quilt. You had this over here and this over here, and so, but no, so that's kind of how it got started. And then worked with the Alliance on a couple other things. And then a couple of years ago, I actually had the chance. They offered me a position to come on staff. And I thought, I've been coming to these meetings and doing these things on my nights and weekends, and now you want to pay me to do it? And our farm's small enough that I need off-farm income. And it was kind of a match made in heaven of, well, this is a no-brainer. Now I can be the guy that helps people like I was when I was facing that farmer's market permit and go, hey, you got a problem, and there's 50, 60 other farmers like you said that's a problem. Let's figure out how we fix this. And a lot of times that ends up being state or federal policy. Sometimes it's just a, agency's rule change. And a lot of times it's just talking to these people and saying, hey, this is what we're facing. Well, I never thought about it that way. And then you get the ball rolling from there.
Sure. So I want to explore. I think I followed you. So the state sets the minimum rules is what you're saying, but the counties can go. Okay. So I happen to live within a mile of 2 other counties. So I farm in several, 3, 4, but they're all right in a little area. They all come together. So I've always said that sometimes state government is local government for me, because I don't need to be crossing my farm and have one set of rules. And when I hit the half-mile line, the farm, there used to be a road, there's not anymore anyway. But I thought that's interesting that the state sets the minimum, so every county can go above that. I would think you'd prefer that the state set the top, but the counties wouldn't have to go that high.
The state set a cap on the fee that they could charge, so the counties can go higher on the fee. They can go higher on certain portions of enforcement. So if there's, if we want to, whatever the case may be, in Illinois, at least the local health departments have that authority on retail. So rather than trying to say, hey, this is, they get statewide guidance from the public health department, but then they can still implement as they see fit on the county. So still trying to keep that local control, but also realize that, hey, there are some things that need to be legislated from the state level too.
And I'm probably being simplistic just because you're from Illinois. So in my head, I'm imagining overzealous local officials, but it's probably not the local officials that are overzealous. In this case, it's probably the state ones, maybe. Or maybe none of them are. You're out in the country in Illinois.
It varies. I mean, it's there's overzealous in places you wouldn't expect it, and then there's whatever in places you'd expect it to be the opposite. So it really is just I don't know that there's one way to paint that with a broad brush.
Yeah, I try not.
No. I understand what you're saying for sure.
People think Chicago's Illinois, and you forget about it. It's clear up in the north, and most Illinois is south.
Right, absolutely. No, it really does give our state an interesting dynamic because you do have this massive population center and these things that go on there, and then rural Illinois is in a lot of ways a whole nother animal. But it all works together. That's our there's a lot of tax revenue that comes out of both. So how do we move together? How do we move forward together? So
yeah.
And I was just reading the mission statement for the Alliance. Yeah. And, one of the key pieces of that is the building resilient communities part.
Yeah.
And here in Iowa, we've got it's really hard to acquire land and get into ownership. Is that a focus of this organization?
Yes, it is. And that is definitely something our members have continually brought up to us. And I would say a large portion of our membership is, I'll say, direct market farmers. We do also have row crop farmers. We run the gamut, but I would say the vast majority is that direct market type farm. And so when we talk land access, sometimes we're talking about urban farming and getting a vacant lot that the city owns and being able to convert that into grown produce for your community. And then the next sentence, we're talking about, farmer in downstate Illinois trying to just find another 80 acres, or whatever the case may be. Or sometimes it's even, there's state-owned land and university-owned land, whether it's from Department of Natural Resources or state parks. And hey, is there a way to implement grazing leases on some of this to manage some of that land instead of having it mowed? Just things like that. So there's all kinds of land access is a big hat, and we try and fill it however we can. But it's definitely a challenge. You look at the price of ground right now, and I haven't seen any recent land auctions. I know some ground that sold not too long ago for $12,700, and everybody's jaw hit the floor because that was not, 3 years ago that'd have been $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 more easily. And now we've seen where we are with the price of commodities, everything else. But even cash rent ground, it's right now with the price of things, it's hard to pencil. It's tough.
I guess to be more pointed with my question, the combination of this potential urban farming, the quick connection I come to is like this BlackRock type ownership in the housing market.
Okay.
We're experiencing some of that pain here with absentee land ownership in Iowa. Does this alliance, has it at all honed in on how do we get some of that type of stuff out of the way so that people can own land or have access to ownership themselves?
So we haven't really dealt with, I'll say, that investment type purchasing of land. It's just not something that's came up enough. And we really are member led. So if it doesn't come from one of our farmer members, we're not going to try and push it, so it's something I'll say we got our eyes and ears on, but we're not dialed in on it yet.
I got my question answered there about the BlackRock piece and some of that the issues with. Do you want to go into a little bit of like transition? I mean, that's a big topic in our member base. Is how do we get the next generation in to agriculture? If there's, you want to go into some discussion about that while we're on this topic with the alliance.
Yeah, so that's certainly something we've looked at, and I don't know the numbers in Iowa, but I imagine it's going to be very similar to Illinois. We're talking about an average age of a farmer well into his 60s. And how do you bring that next generation home? And I grew up in this community, lived here my whole life, and I often joke there's two things that rural communities are really good at exporting: it's their youth and their wealth. And so we don't keep enough of our youth back. And if it's not a job in the ag sector, there's not a ton of jobs in these types of communities. So how do we keep that space growing, that space going? And there's been some work at the state level to do some of those things, and we're trying to get people on those committees and get them informed and see if there's something that we can do from a policy level there. There's a land transition task force that just got passed this year by State Senator Sally Turner, that's going to explore some of those things and has folks from farm, I'll say elder statesman farmers. I'm not going to throw an age out there, but then also some beginning farmers, some different farm organizations, different groups to try and get their input and say, hey, how can we look at this? We know it's a problem. And to me, it's right now it's a really bad time to try and come back to the farm as the next generation when you see these prices and you see where inputs are as well as commodities. When you're talking corn and soy. And it's, this is kind of, I think we'll probably get to it a little bit later on, but to me, it all kind of comes back down to consolidation. We've seen so much consolidation in the marketplace, whether it be seed and chemistry companies, whether it be meat processing, etc., farm machinery, fertilizer companies. It's all the same deal. As they've gotten bigger, they've taken a bigger piece of the pie from the farmer, and that leaves a lot of people hurting. And so trying to find ways to tackle that, I think, will also help tackle some of this land access. And the other thing too, or never mind, sorry, I don't know where I was going with that. I have to edit that one.
I think you're good. I think now might be a good time to jump into some current event here, Louis. I agree. This is a pretty hot topic in the news right now with the cattle market and Trump. A lot of folks are pretty angry right now with some of the rhetoric about these Argentinian imports on beef, and it's not a good look.
Well, that's what brought us to you, Ed, is we were actually having a farm for profit, rush hour ag combination, texting, different things about it. And how when you're talking and your phone picks that up, I think it was the next day, something you'd put out there came up. And I think that's kind of how we got into contact. But tell us about what you put on the internet and what your perspective is on what Mr. Trump is up to.
Yeah. So what was this, couple days ago now, when they had made the announcement of bringing Argentinian beef in to help lower the price of beef. To me, it just it upset me. As you look at the ag industry as a whole right now, or, independent farmers, it felt like beef was about the last bastion of profitability right now. It's about the only sector that seemed to be doing well. And even they weren't even really doing that well. They were just finally making some money after a bunch of bad years. And so to me, it seemed like a knee-jerk reaction that the price of beef's too high. Well, if the price of beef's too high, how come poultry and pork haven't followed it up in the grocery store? People aren't switching. They still want that beef, and they know that beef's good. So I was sitting there the other night a little upset about it, and I had a bunch of phone calls from our farmers, like, what are we going to do? What's going on? Why? And of course, talk policy in a lot of places, and, just kind of put out about 5 things off the top of my head, sitting there in the living room with my kids going, man, there's so many better ways to do this. And, a couple of those, I talked about opening up CRP for grazing. We see it, at least in Illinois, they'll put out, if we have a drought, usually about August, September, they'll say, hey, you can hay and graze your CRP. Well, by then that forage is garbage. It's 120 days old. There's not much quality there. That doesn't really change anything. But then you also have to either. What's that?
It still looks good next to a snowbank.
It does look good next to a snowbank. There's no doubt about that. And it looks better than a dirt lot, feeding hay, but it's not the best utilization of that forage, and then CRP, you're required mid-contract to either burn it or mow it. And it's like, well, we've got these cattle. why can't we use those? And we've seen from some of the regenerative agriculture experts and the studies that they're doing that, managing cattle, moving sheep, moving ruminants, period, animals across the ground, we can store more carbon with that. It's how the bison did it for thousands of years before we ever got here. And it's not the cow's fault, it's the how. If you turn them all out there and leave them all summer, well, you might have dirt, but if you keep them moving, you'll be fine. And so just trying to think of ways that, our policies as a whole have made us plow up those pastures, take out the fence rows, and, we're going to farm ditch to ditch with a few commodities. And now there's not a whole lot of livestock ground left. But if we can utilize some of what's already there, that's easier than trying to reinvent the wheel on crop ground. And then I talked about, sorry.
I was wondering if you tell us about your idea on the corporate interstate shipment program.
Yeah. So that's,
to me, that one's tangible.
Yeah.
I would think. And
so that is the cooperative interstate shipment. So that's a program that USDA runs. And if you have if your state has its own meat inspection, which Illinois is one of them, there's 29 across the U.S. that do, you can apply, and they have to be small plants. So 25 or less employees, which is a lot of our mom and pop butcher shops. But if you're through this cooperative interstate shipment program, now that meat can cross state lines and go into interstate commerce. So hypothetically, if there's a gluttony of beef in Indiana that's state inspected, well, now it can come into Illinois and meet the demand in Chicago. But Illinois doesn't participate in that. And honestly, there's only 9 states currently that do. So there's some barriers there, and, trying to figure out what those are and how USDA can expand that, make it easier for these plants to do that. I think if you talk to a lot of butcher shop owners, they're looking for markets too. They don't have the margins the big guys do either. So they're struggling right along with us livestock producers.
So is the Stewardship Alliance, are they actively working on that right now?
Yeah. So there is a bill out there, federal bill, the Strengthening Local Processing Act. And so what that bill would do, it does a handful of things, but it would increase the cost share. So when these state inspectors are inspecting these CIS plants, they're actually getting reimbursed by the federal government. A portion of that does. So this would increase the cost share of, hey, if the state's acted on behalf of the USDA, let's help them out, type of deal. That bill would also help small plants with their HACCP plans, or hazard analysis and critical control points. So kind of a food safety thing of, this is where we could have a food safety risk. How do we prevent it? How do we, mitigate that risk? So trying to make it easier on these small plants to keep going. And then the other thing it would do is it would create a grant program for these small plants. So we know that meat processing equipment is expensive, just like everything else. There's only a few manufacturers of it. They set their price and say, take it or leave it. And it's hard for these, smaller plants. So if we can expand some of that local processing, we'll know we're helping these local farmers.
I had a couple of these conversations with cattlemen here in the last couple of days, and I've honestly gotten a little frustrated with them, because it's really quick to point the finger at the processor and say, oh, they're screwing us. But then when you ask the cattlemen, well, why aren't you doing this processing yourself? Oh, I don't want to do that kind of work, and it costs a lot. We tried that in Iowa here a few years ago, and, we lost our asses trying to do it. Well, obviously it's the tougher end of the business to run, and usually the toughest end and the things that people don't want to do is the thing that pays the best. So do you think that we're going to see, a way to make more margin in this industry, is that guys are going to have to start operating at their scale, or maybe they can bring the kids back to the farm if they start doing some of this processing themselves, and we make that, more culturally attainable or desirable in our industry?
No, I think there's some truth to that. Any way that a farmer can do some value add, whether that's turning beef on the hoof to ribeyes in the meat case, or I know of a local farm that's taken some of their organic grain and making bourbon out of it. Things like that. So any sort of those value add, I think that's going to be a lot of the ways you can keep this next generation, put some more profitability in it. And you're exactly right. I mean, meat processing it's not a glorious job. If you're on the kill.
I want to do it. I want to look over the fence and see my beautiful herd of cattle. I don't really have much interest in hanging them and butchering them.
No, I
think that's the sentiment in our industry too.
Yeah, I think there's.
So Well, you know,
What's that, Louis?
a little hard on people. I think
Well, I think it's a reality though, and
it's not a reality if you got a feedlot feeding 1,000 head of cattle at a time that you have the actual time to go out and, oh, I'm going to butcher 10 today and get them boxed up and shipped somewhere. That's not a reality. We're talking two different sized farms, two different situations. But I do think,
yeah, you're right. But at the end of the day, it comes down to dollars. So, if you want to make $1 feeding 1,000 head, or you want to make $1,000 feeding 100 head, it's about what makes the most economic sense. So I think people are gonna have to make better decisions based on economics, not just about desire. And I do think there's a piece of that. We all desire to do certain things, and we don't desire to do the butchering part of it.
I think there's some
Even
truth
though
to
it
there.
make us more money.
Some people, most farmers I talk to, farmers want to farm. They don't want to be a marketer. They don't want to be a processor.
Right.
So there is some truth to that, but I do think, like you said, the dollars and cents come into it. And the other thing is though, too, by the time you have the expense of this facility, oftentimes to process your own animals, you're so tied into that, you're no longer processing just your own. To make it cash flow, you better start processing for the neighbors and everybody else. And it's like, well, now, am I a farmer or am I a butcher? And which do I want to be? So it's hard. Because I know I've even looked into it at different times. I was a part of a group that explored putting up a hog and cattle processor here, and I've looked into poultry for our own use, and both things kind of fell apart for either reasons. We never got them off the ground. But the other part of it's labor. Because you can't do all this by yourself, and if you don't have that next generation coming home, where's it coming from? So
when I was like coming out of high school, the confinement building thing was the big boom, right? That was the opportunity for the kid to come back to the farm. Was the farm put up a hog confinement building, and then you had some integrator bring in hogs, and then you did the hog chores. Well, is maybe butchering these animals maybe that the next niche that the next generation can get into to bring margin back to the farm if this gets deregulated?
Yeah, I think butchering can be, and I also just think I've seen a lot more what I would say the commodity type livestock producers starting to do some of their own direct marketing too. And it might not be, might be 2% of their production, might be less than that. But now, hey, I'm at least trying to go into a local butcher with these 10 pigs a month, and then I'm going to start selling off the farm. And so I think that's something that's going to continue to grow.
I think the low-hanging fruit, though, and that's the easiest stuff to get past, would be, especially with the Make America First or Make America Great, whatever the saying is, would be if the president and the legislatures would look into the corporate interstate shipment. That seems like low-hanging fruit, but really even lower than that, it's probably below the ground. It's so low, in my opinion, would be mandatory country of origin or where it came from. That is so simple, because if you're really about, and I hope Mr. Trump actually watches our podcast once in a while, because I would say, Mr. President, we're about making America first. We're about running John Deere tractors and buying American-made Tony Llamas or whatever you're into. Why wouldn't we want to eat American beef? Yes, you could have Argentina beef if you'd like, but I think there's a whole lot of people who would like to see an American flag on that package of meat. No, it's processed here and fed here. And that leads me to my next question, because I don't know this one. I just heard it on the radio, and I don't know that it's true. I might have heard it on a podcast. I might have heard it seen it on Facebook. But when they bring meat in from Argentina, so if you exclude Mexico and Canada, because we're right next to them, do they bring live cattle in and butcher them here and then call them American meat? I would assume from Argentina, it's already boxed, isn't it?
So a lot of times what you're getting on from Argentina is going to be lean beef that they are now taking, so it's already processed, it's boxed lean beef. Maybe it's just primal cuts. So it's a rear quarter of a steer, et cetera. But they're bringing that in, and then they will cut and grind that in with excess trim from fat American cows. So then a lot of those products are going to be your hamburgers, your ground beef, those types of things. And even that lean beef that comes in that maybe they don't add trim to it, well, now that's going into your canned soups and things like that.
But
So
as soon as they do that, then it becomes American.
right. But as soon as they process it or package it in the US, and by process, I mean even just grinding it and packaging it, that becomes a product of the US. Now, the USDA did announce yesterday, and they came out with an announcement of about 13 different things they're going to work on for the beef sector. They're going to enforce voluntary country of origin labels and close that loophole of, hey, you processed it in the US, so you can put a product of the USA on it. So that was a good sight to see. But I think most people would agree with this, consumers, farmers alike, that voluntary is great, but mandatory is where it needs to be. And we've had that before. We had it in the Farm Bill. Was it 2002? And then 2008, they updated it. And then I think in 14, it left. I might be a year or two off on some of those, but it was here before. The reason it got pulled is because of a World Trade Organization agreement. But it only got pulled on beef and pork, your meat. It's still required for produce. So when I buy raspberries for my kids and it says product of Chile, why is that the case? But I don't know if I'm buying beef from Argentina.
Right.
My next big question is then, is any of this beef situation, do you think it's tied to this what do we give Argentina $20 billion of some kind of bailout to Argentina?
That was a currency exchange, Louis.
Oh, okay. So that's not a bailout. We take their currency that's worth. Is it worth that it's made out of?
It wasn't really a trade deal. I don't know. It was a currency exchange, and I'm with you. I don't know. I don't think it was part of anything that they were trying to negotiate on this livestock thing, though.
No, but if we're going to bail out a country or do a currency exchange, whatever it's called, why wouldn't we just buy their products? Instead of, if we're going to have Argentina beef or we're going to have trouble selling our beans, why didn't we buy their beans and beef?
Tariffs on imported beef. They've been importing beef for a long time. And this what they're importing now is probably just a minuscule percentage, but it hit the headline and it tanked the futures. And that's what hurt. Not necessarily the import itself, just the speak of it. But, a lot of the farmers I talk to, like, I don't need protection from imports. I need protection from the packers because they control the market. And so these imports are going to allow them to keep doing that, which is.
Well, in 19, I want to say it was, for some reason, I want to say it was 63, but it was probably 73 because I think Nixon had something to do with it. And I wasn't very old. I only know this from a person that I knew back then that fed a lot of cattle. And whatever Nixon did changed his life dramatically forever because he had sold cattle for big money, chose to fill his yards all up, and it tanked. And I do feel for these around where we're at. We have several people that have built $2-3 million cattle barns. They're beautiful barns. They feed their cattle inside. They're environmentally friendly. And it's just sad when just one or two things from the government can change a market that fast. It's hard to prepare for that. It's hard to deal with it. It's no different than farming the soybeans. If you bought some expensive land, and it's just, I think that's where people don't understand agriculture. I think President Kennedy said it best. Farmers are the ones that we buy everything retail and sell everything wholesale and pay the trucking both ways.
Yeah.
And and it's just the way it is. But Ed, our time's kind of come to a close. We try to keep these so people are interested, but we'll be glad to have you on again sometime. But it was a pleasure to meet you, and keep up them good posts.
Well, Ed, if you could take a little bit of time though before we get off here, and kind of talk about what's going on here in 2026, what you got coming up here for the next cycle there in the legislation.
Yeah. So a couple things we're looking at. Looking at some more monopoly antitrust type work. Really do think that's the bane of a lot of the problems in our ag economy, and how we can break those up. And I've seen some things going on in Minnesota where they've been attacking some of this with state legislation. So it's, how can we look at that? Are there things we can emulate? Ideally, this needs to be done at a federal level though, because you can't break up a monopoly in Illinois and then have it move to Indiana and do the same thing. Because these are national companies. So we're exploring those. MCool's going to be a big part of our push as well. and also it's just trying to look at how do we reduce some of these regulatory barriers for farms, and how do we get more of this local food into places it needs to be. There was a federal program called Local Food Purchasing Agreement that was buying from local farms, and then that food would enter the food bank system, and that was ended here this past June. And I know from farmers that we work with that was a boon to them. They finally had a steady purchaser, and they feeling good about what they're doing, uplifting both ends of the food system there. And then that kind of left. And how do we bring something back like that? Are there tweaks we need to make to that program so it can be a lasting one? Can we get that rolled in a farm bill if and when we ever have one? That type of thing. Because a lot of these farmers that are growing these local food, things like this, they're not getting the crop insurance subsidies, or they're not getting some of these other ad hoc programs that roll through USDA. So it's kind of the first time they felt like they were getting supported, and as quick as it was here, it was gone. And then the last thing too, as we've seen this consolidation and globalization of our food system, we've lost a lot of that funding for infrastructure. And whether that's, every town in Illinois has got a grain elevator, but very few of them got a butcher shop. Very few of them got a wheat mill. Very few of them got a cannery anymore. In the 60s and 70s, that was a big business around here, and that's all left. So how do we bring some of that back that allows these food farmers options to get into more wholesale, and also give some of our farmers more opportunities to diversify? I mean, can we grow some oats again and make oatmeal, and will that help reduce our long supply on corn? That's probably not the perfect answer. That's not going to be the only answer, but can it be a part of a bigger solution?
I think those are all excellent things to be working towards. So how can listeners get more involved and support this policy change? So
I say the easiest thing to do is, if you're in Illinois, we'd love to have you join up and be a member of ours. Check us out, ilstewards.org. Hope to have a new website launched here this week, so maybe you'll see the new one. But other ways, I always tell people, and I don't care if we're talking healthcare, if we're talking ag, if we're talking whatever, if there's something you're passionate about, there's probably a group working on it. And, when it comes to lobbying, policy, et cetera, there's a lot of big money out there. And the only way to beat big money is big people. So get together with some of your friends and start talking, start working together, and start getting a hold of your lawmakers.
That's excellent.
Well, Ed, thanks for coming on the podcast. It was a pleasure to meet you. I think maybe we get into the next session. Maybe we'll give you a call and get you back on, see what's going on in Illinois. And for our listeners, I hope you rush on back for another episode. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Ed.